Hey friends, so last week I had the chance to go to my first ever Star Trek Las Vegas, and anyone who knows me knows what a big deal this is to me. I also got to give a big speech at a big gay Star Trek party about how much Star Trek means to me and how much it's enriched my life. And I did happen to grab a recording of that speech, and if you're a $2 patron, you can hear it right now at patreon.com/theGaytheistManifesto. Our new patrons this week are Charles, the Geck, and Kyla. Thank you all so much. Love you, friends.
Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, and yeah, kind of an interesting episode full of complicated thoughts today, as if that's not our normal shtick. But, I spent a lot of time talking about my vagina. Like, let's just be real. And a lot of time talking about how amazing that's been for me and how I kind of feel like I'm just settling more into life lately. And I don't remember how long ago this was, but at my job, I used to spend a lot of time helping with the new hires. And I got up in front of the class, did a bunch of things, and they were like, hey, so when we introduced ourselves to the class, we had to say an interesting fact about ourselves. So, like, what's an interesting fact about you? And at that point in my life, I kind of had two choices. One was like, yeah, I'm a giant Star Trek nerd and I can speak a little Klingon maybe. The other thing is like, yeah, I've got a podcast and I do public speaking and I get to travel a lot and I have lots of friends all over the country and all over the world. And, both of those things are super important to me. But of course, if I said something about the podcast, everyone would ask, oh, what's your podcast about? And it's people I don't know super well, and I don't know that I want to have that conversation in a professional environment in front of people I don't know. So I went with the Star Trek thing. And so the next day, somebody approached me in the break room, and they said that one of the supervisors had come in and asked how the training was, and pulled up a YouTube video of me being on Arian Foster's podcast, who he used to play running back for the Houston Texans, NFL player. Flew me out to Houston to be on his podcast, and a couple of people thought that was pretty cool because they're football fans. And here's the thing. I obviously don't make any secret of the fact that I'm trans. I don't make any secret of the activism that I do or the podcast or anything like that. It's just not necessarily something that I lead with. And I have to get to know somebody a little bit, especially in a professional environment, because you never know who might make a target, make an issue of it. And I got kind of mad when I found out he did that. I was like, man, that's not your story to tell. What are you doing? But then I thought, I've spent literally the entire 5 years since I came out being like, hey, I'm Callie Wright, trans woman. This is a thing that I do. So like, I couldn't really be mad about it, but I kind of was. And I thought, gosh, where's that coming from? Because it's not that I'm embarrassed about it. It's not that I think it's a secret or I'm ashamed or anything like that. But I just sort of felt this sense of like, I'm kind of wanting to segment my life now. I don't want to stop doing the podcast. I don't want to stop doing public speaking, but like, I'm just feeling less and less like I want my entire life to be about being trans. And that's a weird feeling because from the time that I came out until very recently, most of my entire life has been about me being trans and pursuing hormones and pursuing surgeries and, social transition and awkward conversation and awkward questions and that kind of stuff. And so you just kind of get into that rhythm of things and you get used to that being your life. And post surgery, post hormones, generally speaking, I'm read as I want to be read by the general public. And generally speaking, it's not a conversation that I really have to have unless it's a conversation that I choose to have, or it's in the context of podcasting and activism. And the more and more I go along, the less and less I'm comfortable with that being my entire life. Like I want to have a very clear border between my trans life, the activism that I do, the parts of my life that are specifically about me being trans, and the parts of my life that are just me, like roller derby, for example, or being a Star Trek nerd, or, being into technology or work or any of that kind of stuff. And I have some really complicated feelings about this. And my friend Leo has been posting on and off about this on Facebook because he's kind of in the same position. So I thought, like, this would be a pretty interesting conversation to have. So welcome back to the show, friend.
Hey.
This is a really long monologue that I didn't have prepared. It's fine. I'm a talker. It's what I do. So why don't you kind of talk me through where you've been at with this? Because obviously, as a trans guy, the experiences are different. But I think the overall sort of thinking and feeling is similar. Am I right there?
Yeah. So I not like super public, as in here's this big podcast public, but pretty much as soon as I came out, I was just kind of out there. So it really was a large part of my life in that, okay, I'm doing this thing with this group, or I'm trying to get my name changed, trying to be in school and doing this, trying to get this surgery, and pretty much like the trans guy versus anything else. So like, not like anything that was like my hobby or anything. It was just kind of like, oh yeah, like that's Leo, that's like the trans dude. Okay. And everything, like conversations, it was based around that. And I mean, still now, it's not something that it's like, oh yes, I am now ashamed of this, I must hide it.
Right.
But when I was coming up on lower surgery, things started to change. Like you see like the memes and stuff online, and I was just like, well, that's weird. Like I don't think about this. Like it's not really a part of my life, and it hasn't been for a bit. Because there was, I think 2 years between going in for my first stage of surgery and kind of like the last surgery that I'd had.
And for context, phalloplasty is a multi-stage thing. Like there are several surgeries involved. It's not like mine, like one and done kind of thing, right?
Oh yeah. So it was the first stage of what planned to be 4, which is not 4, but that's a different story. It was just kind of like, okay, like there's nothing physically, at least like if someone caught me naked or something, that would be any different from a cis guy, especially like thinking about it for me, like phalloplasty was designed for cis men. It was never, I guess, like intended to be used for trans people. So it's just like, okay, like this is a thing.
So it was supposed to be like reconstructive surgery for cis guys who had like
a war injury,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
And it was done like early. It's not as recent as people think, but so for me, it's always been something like, okay, like this isn't even something that's trans specific, compared to like something like a hysterectomy, where the men who are getting hysterectomies are usually identify as trans, or something. And so it was just kind of like, wow, like, I could relate to the top surgery memes or the binding memes. I could have these conversations with anyone, and it felt more connected, more rooted. It was much more a part of my life. And then when lower surgery was coming up, it was just kind of like, oh wow, like this is really, I guess, sense of finality for me, because I was like, this entire time, it has been more than just the physical. But since all of that stuff had already started falling in line, I had friends. I have been out and living as a guy for some odd years, so it's not even like, oh yeah, like this new exciting thing happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not excited when I hear my name. It's just kind of my name. Like I'd get weirded out if it was something else. And I've been being read correctly for years too, and so it's just this sense of finality where it's just like, well, after this, it's just kind of over. There's not this next step. So, I will have to think about like replacement stuff down the line, but that's not a trans thing. Mm-hmm. The fertility issue, like thinking about that, like I don't think about it as a trans issue. I'm just like, well, there are infertile or sterile men. Like that's just, that's a thing. And as that's come up, I've just been like, well, it seems kind of pointless to bring this up when I first meet people now, because there's not really anything it impacts. I'm not nervous to go to a bar or something because something might come up. I'm not holding back in the same ways that I was before surgery, or even before I even thought about surgery. So what does this mean? Like, I have to bond with people from common interests and not this
Right.
and not this physical characteristic or something. And it's been weird because it was a goal of mine when I first came out to just kind of be like I don't know, like assimilated just into culture or whatever, just to not feel like the oddball. And now it's happening because I'm pretty gender conforming, like no one, like not really a wave maker in appearances. And so it's weird. It's good, but it's not something that was just like, oh yes, this is wonderful, end of story. Because there is things now, like there's things online or having to make and try to actually get like 2 Facebook accounts together. And how do I balance still wanting to be a part of the community in ways like education? How do I help people? But at the same time, like, oh crap, what if like my picture is here and then someone's like, I saw you in this thing. Right. Because, when you're talking about like small little local support groups, like the chances of running into someone who would be like, I'm going to scream and tell everyone, I would put my bets on getting struck by lightning before that happened.
Right.
But it is still like, okay, like how is this? How am I going to navigate this now? Like it's odd. And it also feels a little bit like losing something because it was such a huge part of my life. Everything that I did, all of my energy like went into this, and now it's, for lack of a better word, like gone. Not that the people aren't there, but it's different. Like you go into a group and want to talk, but just can't because it's like, well, I want to talk about other things that aren't transition related, like school. Like, what do I want to do as a person in the young 20s with the rest of their life versus how do I get access to this doctor? How do I navigate this healthcare system? I mean, the only thing that I would ever want to do in the future at this point would be to change my birth certificate, but that's kind of out of my control.
Right. Yeah. Born in Ohio?
Yeah, I was born in Ohio.
Yeah, same. So, yeah, solidarity, friend. Yeah. So, when I first started going to support groups, there was somebody who had come back to a support group after basically the way it was presented is she kind of like, she was part of the community for as long as she needed it. And once she felt comfortable in who she was, she kind of just like went back to normal life. And I was immediately kind of conflicted about that. I'm like, well, you should be able to live your life however you want. Like the fact that you're a trans person doesn't obligate you to be an active member of the community and to give all of your time and effort and stuff into the community. But like, it also sort of felt to me like, oh, well, I used you for what I needed you for. I'm done. See ya. And I mean, that's not the attitude, right? That's not what she was thinking. And so that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now, right? Like I spent a lot of time in support groups and, at first I was the person who was there to talk about all my problems and need all of that help, right? And then towards the end, I was the person who was like, yeah, I've actually figured a lot of this stuff out. And now I've got like advice and perspective to give to other people. And then it was just kind of like, I don't really need this anymore. Like I'm doing okay. And I'm glad that those things exist for people who need them, but that's just it's not a place for me anymore. And I went back to a support group meeting, I want to say maybe a year or so ago, because there was somebody who had just come out and was looking, and I was like, hey, like if you want to go to one of these groups and you need a friend there, like I'll go with you. It's like, I don't necessarily need to be there, but if you do and you're not comfortable, I'll go with you. And I did. And it was so uncomfortable. And not because they were doing anything wrong. It wasn't a bad place. It just wasn't a place for me because I'm pretty well settled in. And that, that kind of started the conversation in my head. Like, so where do I want to be in this? Because, I do a podcast and I do public speaking, and a significant portion of my life is about this. And if I really wanted to walk away from all of that, I'd have to give that up too. And I don't want to do that. because it's something that means a lot to me. I've made a lot of connections, but like a lot of those connections are because of the podcast. Therefore, I have tons of these friends who the context, at least of our beginning, was that I'm trans, right? And that doesn't diminish it. That doesn't make it not important, right? Like I met my wife that way. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that's not important. It's just like I can't get away from that context in a large part of my life. And part of me is kind of feeling like I want to. And on one hand, I own the right to want to do that because my life is mine to live as I choose, right? But like also a lot of people have given me a lot and I feel the need to pay that forward. And so like I want to have both things, and I'm not sure how to do that. And I'm not even sure, again, I talked a minute ago about how like I almost feel like those feelings are kind of problematic in a way because I don't want to feel like, yep, got what I need, I'm tossing you out the window now, because that's definitely not where my head's at. But it's hard not to feel that way.
I also think it's not to like sound crappy towards anyone. Like there's a big shift, I think, in mentality from first coming out and first being out and needing something and then being and just living your life for even just like a certain amount of time and realizing like, whether this is going or not, like I need socialization, I have bills to pay, things like that.
Right.
But when I first came out and for a while, like I was very like anti-stealth, like not even just like, people should have the right to live their life. Like, and I own that. I was just like, why wouldn't someone do this? Like, why wouldn't you do this? And like, I'm sure part of it was because like, I was just like, I can't find anyone who's X years out of this or has done this. And there's just no one there. Like, I can't see it. So like, what am I supposed to do? So definitely coming up on this, it was weird because I was like, oh wow, like for so long I had this like animosity towards people who would just kind of, back away from the community in either public or just in like social circles. And now here I am realizing that it just fades away. It's not even me saying, oh, like for me, it was like there were some of those thoughts of like, oh, I've taken so much and I still feel the need to pay it forward. But it's also just kind of like, it was even before lower surgery though. It was just like, I don't have something in common anymore. And especially now and moving further away, just timeline wise, even the advice or like recommendations I would have for binders or packers or where to go for these things just aren't applicable anymore. So like when I was looking for packers, there was no place in the city to purchase it in a store. Mm-hmm. That's not the case anymore. Same thing with binders. There was one place that was reputable to buy binders from, and that's not the case anymore. And so there's this, okay, like I want to give back, but now I can't even give back in some of these capacities that I would feel the need for. Like, what is happening with this?
Right. Well, you haven't used those resources in so long. The knowledge that you have in your head, it just doesn't apply.
Oh yeah. So like, I haven't needed to bind or wasn't binding or had to purchase one in at least 3 years. So for me to look at a company, I'm like, well, I've heard these things, but I have no personal experience with it. And even I was looking at Underworks, which is the big binder site. Like I was just looking at their website the other day because I was like, oh yeah, like this is what I use. And they don't even have like the same names for things anymore. I was just like, oh wow, it kind of looked like this. Like this is kind of the description of it. And so it's weird because, and especially from my position, like I'm 22. Like there aren't a lot of 22-year-olds who are at this point. And so it's like, okay, like I feel like transpa, like, or like trans dad, but at the same time, like it's not all figured out quite yet.
Right.
Like in the slightest. But I'm sorry, I tangent. Anyway, to get back to
you're good. No,
the point.
that all applies. And that's not been my experience, but that makes a lot of sense because it makes, I mean, like I really want to contribute, but I don't know that I have anything to contribute. So why would I take up space?
Yeah. And so like, there are times when I know I can contribute, and it's how I've been kind of navigating is like, I know in lower surgery groups I can contribute because had lower surgery.
Right.
you know, in top surgery groups, I know I can at least contribute about my experience. Same with like other surgery or things about testosterone. When it starts to get iffy is when I'm like, oh, okay, like you're talking about like kind of social stuff that I'm a little fuzzy on, or it was just different because I came out almost 10 years ago. So when I came out, like it was just like, hide, my child, hide.
Right.
Versus I think there's a lot less of that now. Obviously I don't know because I'm not coming out right now. And so it just feels odd. And then it feels like when I first came out, there was this, you know, oh, this is hard. We'll give it time. Like it will get better. And it's just that feeling was like, well, what? Like, this is the advice you have for me right now? Just wait, let things do their job. Like, how can I just do that? Like, that's hard. Like, you're full of crap. And then here I am talking to people, having gone through similar things, and like, friend, give it time. Like,
right. You know what it feels like to me? And I think this kind of is what it boils down to that makes me so uncomfortable that I feel this way. It feels like internalized transphobia to me. It feels like me wanting to separate from my transness as if that is there's something wrong with that, you know, and that's not what it is, but that's what it feels like. And I see it so much in other trans women that I've seen where, I mean, they express like actual hatred for transness. Like, you know, there was somebody in our local community here who said that somebody else could never fully live their life as a woman if they didn't leave the trans world behind, you know, like, and that is so gross, like so unbelievably gross. And I don't feel that way. I would never feel that way. But that still kind of feels like what I'm doing. And so it feels like it feels like internalized transphobia, and it feels like a gleeful exercise of privilege. And both of those things make me really uncomfortable.
I think when it comes to internalized transphobia, like, I think that a lot has to do with why am I doing something? If I honestly believed like, oh, I could never be a real man if I was involved in any type of trans activity, then I'd be like, you know what? This
Right.
could be an issue. But for me, I'm just like, it's just not a major part of my life. That's why it doesn't feel right. Or it's a genuine like disconnect where it's like, okay, well, I'm here and I still want to be a part of this, or I still want to be able to help out in the ways that I can. But at the same time, I can't just be uncomfortable. Like that's not healthy for me. I can't feel anxious in this group or whatever, because that's just not healthy for me. And I have issues with thinking that's okay, even though objectively I know
Right.
that's okay.
Exactly. Well, it's because 10 people could tell you that's what they're doing, and you'd be like, yeah, you go, friend, that's the right thing to do, but you're doing the same thing and you can't take your own advice.
Right.
I have the same problem.
Because it's like, oh, if everyone did this, what would we do?
Right.
And it's hard to remember that there are people who, no matter how far in their transition they get, still feel comfortable doing this. There's not the same thing, or they've had that and go back. And so that's kind of the thing. Like, because I have been so involved and I like being involved in the ways that make me comfortable, that I'm just like, seizing.
Right. Yeah, I think I was thinking the other day about, so we talked in the last episode that we did a lot about surgery and sort of, you know, recovering from surgery and settling in after surgery and that kind of stuff. And like, just like hygiene wise, sexually, all of that kind of stuff. When I think about all of the problems that I have, basically none of them are trans specific problems anymore. And what bonds the trans community so much, I feel like, is a lot of times it's shared experience, but specifically shared struggle, right? And when you're a person who stops having so many of those struggles, it I have an instinct to not want to take up space in places I don't belong, right? And so, I mean, I can speak to the experience that I had transitioning and coming to terms with who I was and learning to be okay with who I was and all of that kind of stuff. But the further that journey gets behind me, kind of like you were saying, the less and less I feel like that has to contribute to the modern conversation. You know what I mean? Because even in just the last 5 years, the landscape has changed so much, in some ways very positively, in some ways very negatively. But like in a lot of ways, I just kind of feel like I have less to contribute. and so like it's hard to know where to fit in that. And it's, you know, I don't want to take up space because I don't jump in and we're like, oh yeah, I have this problem too. And then every trans woman's like, yeah, I wish I had the problem of figuring out how to orgasm with my vagina. I don't even have one of those as desperately as I want to have one. And I'm like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have said anything at all. Cause I don't belong in that conversation anymore. Like I don't.
And I think that's hard. And I'm of the opinion that no matter how far someone is in their transition, they have the right to talk about their struggle because it's a struggle. And then, or that happens, or people are like, oh yeah, you can't have that conversation. And then they're in the point where they're like, I need this question answered, or I need to hear experiences. And it's like, well, are you wondering why people aren't talking about this? Because
right.
Like 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago, someone tried to talk about this, and now you just kind of pushed us all in a corner or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like if someone's like, oh yeah, I'm in a really bad spot because I can't have this. And then someone's just like, oh yeah, I'm there and I'm having these issues. I think timing wise can be a little better.
Time and place. Yeah.
But saying like, oh yeah, just because someone has access to this surgery or this treatment. Yeah. Like it's a privilege. Like it costs money to have this. It takes time off work, and physically, like, some instances, it's just really hard to get or impossible to get certain things. But that doesn't mean going through it is in any way fun or easy.
Right.
But I feel the same way where I go into a group and I'm like, how am I feeling? Well, these complications from surgery suck and I'd really like to talk about it, but I have a penis and I am some odd years on T and don't worry about, you know, all of these things. I'm just going to sit here. Or it's the awkward silence where it's like, okay, well, actually, I am having these issues. Crickets, because there are either very few or no one in that space because of other issues, or because it's just not the space for them who share that. So it's like, here's my thing. Oh, now I feel even more awkward because no one else here can relate to this. You know, if I post on like a surgery specific group, or if I talk to cis people, like if specifically for me, cis guys about this, I feel a lot better. You know, and I think for me, what really started it was with lower surgery, especially for trans guys or transmasculine people, is that there's a lot of awful, just incredibly awful, damaging information and opinions on it within the trans community, that I started having this separation just by acknowledging the fact that I needed this surgery, because I was like, oh wow, like everyone thinks this is unnecessary, like that it's just going to be like a botched, like sausage looking thing or whatever. Like it was more awkward or harder to talk to transmasculine people about it than it was with cis guys, or even just cis people in general, because I was like, well, what if it's small? And if I'm talking to a cis guy, they were like, well, yeah, like a lot of people struggle with that. Like I struggle with that. And I'm just like, oh yeah, cool.
Right. Well, yeah, I had that conversation. Is like, I had my first orgasm and I was talking to someone. I was like, yeah, but I had to work really hard to get it and took a lot of effort. And they're like, yeah, welcome to having a vagina. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's a common thing. Okay.
I think right now it's the pee thing where I'm just like, it goes everywhere and sometimes it drips in my pants, and it's just like, yeah, like that's a thing that can just happen. And I'm like, you know what? I prepared for years for this, like research all these the surgery crap. And you know what? I was not prepared for this. I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now. And I'm going to go wash the shower curtain again.
How is it that you have a new penis, I have a new vagina, and we have the same pee problems? How is that a thing? Oh my God, that's fantastic.
Actually, being post-transitioner or thinking about it is really all to do with urination issues.
You're not wrong. Oh my God. Because literally after the catheter came out the first time, I was like, oh my God, it's everywhere. What's going on?
I still have one in. It's lovely.
Oh, it's great. Oh my God. Fantastic.
But the privilege thing is actually something that still bothers me a little bit just in my life, because I'm just like, the position that I'm in, like I am super grateful for the family that's helping me. Like, I can live with a parent, guardian, and have help funding this. Like, there are lots of people who can't do that, and people that I know who would love to be in this position, and to be able to think about like post-transition life or stuff. And I'm just like, wow, like maybe I'm just being just like done with just don't want to deal with like hard realities that other people are facing. But then I'm like, that's other people. I'm not saying other people can't enjoy things or like feel good as being part of the community in more like outways or things like that. But it's just weird, because on one hand it's like, well, if this was for me and how I viewed it, it was a very medical thing. So if I had any other medical issue, like if there's anything going on, if I had a broken arm and needed help paying for a broken arm, and my family could help me pay with a broken arm, would I feel as bad?
That's a great point.
No, I wouldn't, because there was this arm, it was broken, it needed to be unbroken.
Yeah.
But, and obviously it doesn't have the same social weight. So like, I'm not going to ever be like passed over for a job because I had a broken arm or something. But like, those are the things that kind of help. I'm just like, okay, like, well, if this was anything else, physical health, mental health, or socially, like, would I have the same feeling? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because and I think that part of that is hearing these debates or conversations about access to care, and that, oh, well, obviously, like people can live without this, or things like that, and being like, well, I wouldn't necessarily drop dead tomorrow or have a death sentence 6 months, a year down the line if I couldn't have accessed this. But at the same time, like, I just think about the things I want to do. Like, I'm going to Philly this week and I want to hang out with people. Like, pre-op, that would never have happened. But that conversation is like, well, other people can live without having this surgery, and they're perfectly fine being in the trans community. Even just for necessity, like, oh, this is where I feel most comfortable because of this. That, because now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, well, I have this and I don't need this anymore. It's like, wow, this is weird. Like, this is just kind of uncomfortable, because it is like it does feel like exercising privilege, where it's like, I just don't need this anymore. Like,
well, and I think, at least for me, part of it comes for this like deep-seated need I have to feel like I'm part of the solution. And so I feel like if I'm not being the trans ambassador in 100% of my life, then I'm doing a disservice to the community, because like, I'm incredibly privileged for a trans person. Matter of fact, being trans is the only mark I have against me. Like, well, and the fact that I'm not a man, but I'm white, you know, I have a good middle-class job, solid income, supportive family, good health insurance, all that sort of stuff. And, I mean, it's very important for me that I'm doing what I can to get other people access to those things. But the reverse of that is that it's like, if I step away and take care of myself, I can't take the entire weight of that on myself and realize, like, I didn't create the system that denies trans people healthcare. So I'm not personally responsible for eradicating it. Like, obviously I want to do everything that I can to change the way things are, but I can't take personal responsibility if I step back to do something for me and take care of myself, to where it's like, well, I sat on the couch and watched Star Trek all day today. Therefore, a trans person in the world is going to be having a worse time. Like, there's not the direct, like, one-to-one relationship between those things. And I think that's someone for, like, it's part of my natural personality to want to feel like I'm doing something about a problem. And being trans, obviously, the problem that I've attached myself to is the way that trans people are treated in society, and queer folks, and just general social justice issues. And I think that's a big part of it too, is that, we've programmed this sort of personal responsibility into ourselves, realizing that, like, there are certain things all of us do to uphold systems of privilege and oppression, right? But we didn't create those systems, and a single individual act is not going to be the thing that tears them down, right? It's a collective thing. And so, like, I think striking the balance there is kind of the same thing about striking the balance. Like, I just want to live my life as a normal human being, but I do have this unique experience that colored so much of my interaction my interaction with the world for such a long time. And I don't know how to calculate my place in the world based on those things anymore.
And it is really weird. Also because this is going to sound really weird. And like, I don't feel transgender anymore. If I had to use a word, I'd use transsexual. And I know that has a lot of weight to it and a lot of issues that are attached with it for other people. But at this point, because it is just like, well, physical sex characteristics, they changed. And for me, like, at this point, like, that's the most accurate. Any of the issues that I have right now are literally just issues are related to that. Mm-hmm. However, like, for simplicity, like, I'm not quite transgender for me, but I'm not cis because it's just not how I was born.
Right.
And so it feels like this weird, like, gray area where I'm just like, well, I have a lot in common with the cis people over here, just like day-to-day life. Like, if I'm worried about my genitals, it's because of something like fertility or something like that. That's not a trans issue in itself. Like, being sterile or something is not a trans issue. There are plenty of trans people who have kids.
Mm-hmm. And plenty of cis people who can't.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's...
And so it's just like, okay, well, there's that. But at the same time, like, I have this thing, like, I do still have to be cautious about what doctors I go to. I still have to think about replacement stuff down the line and things like that. So it's not quite the cis area. So it's just like, okay, like, I'm just going to be here in the middle, chilling out and making a fire or something, find the other, like, gray area people. Because I feel like a lot of the time there is this such stark dichotomy. It's like, you're either with us or against us. You're either this cis person or this trans person. Mm-hmm. I think part of that is just like, what interactions with communities have I had? And a lot of them are on college campuses or online. Both of those places are going to have a lot of people who are privileged or have privilege in the areas that would influence, like, academic discussion on gender. Mm-hmm. Thinking about, like, I'm this singular trans person. I didn't make the system and things like that. Like, that's true. At the same time, it does feel uncomfortable because I'm like, well, if I didn't help this person, then who would? Mm-hmm. Like, what happens if that, like, or this interaction didn't happen, like, 2 years ago? Like, where would this person be or something? Right. Like, it is hard. And it's just like, I have this privilege. I have this privilege of being able to recover from surgery. And it, like, for me, like, I've had time off. Not that the time off has always been fun, but, like, I have all of this time that I can do all of these things with. And what do I want to do? I want to sit down and play Fallout. Like,
right.
It's weird. But at the same time, like, talking about gaming is like, oh yeah, like, this feels good. Rehashing all of the conversations I've had or answering questions about surgery or where I got hormones, how I got hormones, how I changed my name, like, all of the, like, FAQ questions that get asked in groups or just, like, online or in person. It's like, oh, well, this actually feels really draining. I don't feel like myself when I'm talking about this. Mm-hmm. Like, I love talking about surgery, like, some of the more technical aspects of it, or I do like complaining to people that I'm close with or who I know are going to go down this road some of the times. But if I'm going to say, like, what makes me feel comfortable, it's this not trans stuff. And it's not because I think being trans is icky or whatever. It's just, what do I like talking about? And I think it's hard, especially since so much, just percentage wise at this point in my life, has been, oh, well, the thing that makes me feel good, the thing that I've been doing a lot is trans activism. Like, literally, like, several months after I came out, like, oh, yeah, you want to do this thing? Like, here, do the thing. And started doing the things where it was talking about my experience. To the point now where I'm just like, I deserve to have a private life. I deserve to have to have information about myself, not be public information. I deserve like to just live the life that I want to live, regardless of what other people think, within reason. You know, I'm not going to start kicking kittens just because I can.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with that. I think one of the best things that I could have seen, or that I did see when I first came out, was just people who were further along living their life. And, you know, not to sound crappy, but just like normal people, not like this like, I don't know, like fairy tale person like down the street who is necessarily an actor or some major athlete, because that's great. But at the same time, like, what hope do I have then, who's not this profoundly amazing actor or this superstar like person who's going to make millions of dollars in their life, who could just literally pay everything out of pocket, never have to worry about like, oh, do I have to rely on this person or not? Like, how do I actually get to a point where I can have like a career? And so now that it's this point where I'm just like, well, yeah, like the things that concern me, they're just college. What do I want to study? Like, do I want to study? Do I want to do something else? Like, no one can help that. Like, it's not like I made this conscious decision, like, oh, screw the trans people, I'm going to focus on me. Like, it's just, okay, like, this is a population, but in order to help, like, I also need to help myself, because I'm not going to be able to do anything if I'm paralyzed all the time by, like, indecisiveness, or I'm just exhausted. And also just, like, if I go to Pride, I just want to hang out with people. Like, I know about Pride. I know the history behind it. There's some times where I just want to be outside, half naked, and hanging out with people, and not necessarily worry about, like, oh, here's this information in the community. Here are the people you need to talk to. This is my life story. Like, this is what happened when I got kicked out, or things like that. It's just like, I just want to have fun. You know, I've worked hard, right, for all of this. Like, I'm here to have a good time. And just like gay people aren't expected to be like token gay at Pride. Like, I feel similarly, like, just because you can see my top surgery scars doesn't mean that I want to talk about this right now.
Right.
Or even, I think I said something like, it feels awkward being at Pride now. Because for so long, it really was just, oh yeah, like, I'm the trans person at Pride. Like, I have to worry about like wearing a binder or whatever, getting misgendered at Pride. And I'm just here like, as like a gay, like, what is happening?
Right. I'm just a gay.
And so it's just kind of like, okay, like, I'm here. This is weird. And because I feel like there is so much separation between like trans people and gay people, it also feels like one of those things again, where it's like this gray area where I'm like, okay, well, I guess these are my people.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Who do I hang out with?
But like, but it's not quite that, because I know y'all can be real crappy about this stuff. Yep. And so like, if you knew this, would you still be cool? But at the same time, like, trans people over there are telling me, because I don't want to be out all the time, like, I'm a traitor. Right. Like, what do I do? And it's just, it's really weird. And I don't think the people who are making those traitor comments really understand what they're doing. A lot of the information stuff, like, not even to not even to justify it, but like, for me, I have to justify everything.
Right.
Like, so much information comes from people who are further along in transition, who could very well be stealth or not consider themselves trans anymore. So much information comes from people in that situation. And then they don't understand that there's like, someone said information, someone's leading this group, therefore they must be out all of the time. Like, they wear the shirt that says I'm trans, like, all of the time. Like, it's just everywhere, when it's not. I think it really is hard to imagine, like, when it's not your life, having a life where you're trans, but not having it consume things or not even having to think about it really. Like, you know, I and for me, it's a little different just because I've been dealing with surgery stuff like since I've had surgery, but you know, it's like, oh, like I have this issue, but it's just a urinary issue. Like it's a UTI.
Right. Everybody gets those.
And like, it's just, I don't have to worry about it. And now like, there's not even that added stress of, oh, I have to have someone possibly look at my genitals or anything. It's
Right.
just
Because
like,
that's been the last year or so of your life, right?
and I'm not worried about it. Like, I'm not like, oh crap, someone's going to see like this part of my body I'm really ashamed of. It's just like, like this is my body. And I think that was the big thing. The big thing now is just everything's normal. Like,
Yeah, well, and you know the change that I've noticed that's interesting is that like so much of my everyday life is actually more influenced by my being queer than it is being trans, because again, like I've sort of gotten the sense, generally speaking, people don't realize that I'm trans unless I tell them, just based on some interactions that I've had with people. So like obviously my work life and you know, it just never really comes up. But if I'm making small talk with somebody and I mention that I have a wife, sometimes I get looks. And so like, that's the thing that's on my mind more than anything else now. And that's a real weird thing, because when I came out, that was an afterthought. It was like, hey, I'm trans. This is kind of a thing. And it's just like, it's the big thing. Every conversation is about that. It's this radical change that I'm making in my life. And it's like, oh yeah, so like, that means I'm a woman who's primarily attracted to other women. So like, yeah, I guess I'm gay too. It was completely an afterthought. But like, as far as my day to day goes, that's actually probably the thing that has the more influence on how I interact with people and how I interact with the world. And that's a really weird reversal too.
it's for me, the big weird thing is just like, I like sports. And so I'm just like being a sports liking person is the thing. I'm just like, oh yeah, like, this is who I am. I'm just going to talk to these people about it all the time. Like I can go to a sports bar, things like that. It's great. Because for me, like I haven't dated pretty much since I came out, for the exception of like one or two people. And so even like now, I'm like in Chicago, like every other week, or like dealing with a hospital stay like every other month. But so like even the fact that I'm not straight isn't a huge issue right now, just because like,
You just got other stuff going on.
yeah, like what am I gonna do? Like,
right.
you know, there's codes of conducts in hospitals. Like I can't really pick up anyone there.
Right. So that hot nurse over there. Nope, can't do it.
so like really, the big shift for me is just like the fact that like I don't, and it sounds so weird, but like I'm so normal.
Right.
Like I go to the barber shop and I talk about football. Or like after one of my stages, like it was when the Mayweather McGregor fight was happening.
Oh yeah.
And like I went to a bar and was just like chatting it up with this dude, like who I didn't know, and we were just talking about this, nothing else. Like he was just like, oh, what are you?
Right.
Do you have a penis? Are you old enough to be here? You look like you're 12, son. Why are you here?
Right.
But it's just it's really weird, because for so long that just wasn't the case. Or like now I'm just like, well, yeah, like the big issue I have is school. What do I want to do with my life? Like being a 22-year-old, like that is my issue right now. Yeah. And it's really weird. And like same thing with like mental health stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm in the market for a new therapist. Do I need them to be super trans competent? Because I'm sure like it'll come up, like, you know, my life has been influenced by this, but moving forward, dealing with life stress, other than like, is something going wrong surgery wise? Like it's not really there, because I've taken the time, you know, for the most part to process just living my life as a guy. It's just every day, like some of the things that like would freak me out in the beginning, like just aren't there. Like it's my life.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, oh wow, like does this really need to happen? But then we're back at the other thing where I'm like, well, what if something trans does come up, and then all of a sudden, boom, like transphobic doctor.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard, and obviously, I think every individual has to come to their own conclusions about how much a part of their life they want it to be. I thought it would be an interesting thing to talk through, and I think it has been. I think it's kind of helped me. It's actually helped me, I think, come to peace with a little bit more of it because. At the beginning of the year, I've never been a person who made New Year's resolutions. I never looked down on people who do. I was just like, it's just not my thing. Like I'm not, but human beings are creatures of ritual and that kind of stuff. And so at the beginning of the year, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make a New Year's resolution. I'm not going to call it that, but that's kind of what it is. And I just thought I'm just going to do more in my life that's just for me. And that's why I've been focusing more on Star Trek. And so I've been getting into roller derby and I mean, a lot of that stuff matters. Like Star Trek means a lot to me because it helped me figure out a lot about myself and helped me be okay with myself, being queer and being trans. And roller derby means a lot to me because it's explicitly trans inclusive. It's a super gay sport. And so it's not like those things exist completely outside of that context, but my primary interaction with those things is just because I enjoy doing them. And I promised myself that I was going to do more stuff like that. And I don't know that it was explicitly because I just want to live my life less as an explicitly trans person. And I just want to kind of live my life as Callie. This is who I am. And these are the things that I like. And I don't know that I had quite articulated my reasons for wanting to do that. Cause at first it was just my entire life is about this podcast and this activism and stuff. And that's very, very important to me, but I want my life to be about things that are just for me too. It's okay for me to want that for myself. And I think that was kind of the beginnings of that. And at the end of the day, I don't think it really changes anything because it's not like I said, it's not like I'm going to all of a sudden stop telling people that I'm trans or I'm going to, pretend that I'm not, deny my history, deny who I am, deny my past or anything like that. I'm not going to stop doing the podcast, at least not anytime soon. I'm not going to stop going to cons and giving talks and stuff like that. I just want my life to be about other stuff too. And I think maybe the fact that that's such a struggle is, one of those things in my life that's still a uniquely trans problem. Right.
Can't escape it. They're just always there.
Right, exactly. But I think it's okay to get those things and want to get there as long as it doesn't spill over into the, the explicitly transphobic stuff like we were talking about and wanting to literally pretend you're someone you're not. I mean, if it's for safety, obviously that's always okay to do, but I mean, it's not a safety thing for me. It's just a matter of what I do or don't want to do at this point in my life. And again, this is not a uniquely trans problem, finding balance.
Right.
Just trying to find balance in your life between the things that you want to do and the things that you want to be. And who doesn't struggle with that?
I think the hard thing is that because being trans, especially right now, is super politicized. If this was any other thing, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah.
In this
totally
way.
Right.
We'd just be like, oh yeah, this thing happened again. What am I going to do about it?
Right.
But I mean, just if I wanted to focus less on video games and do more sports because I need more socialization because that would make me happier. Mm-hmm. No one would bat an eye. It'd just be like, oh yeah, your interests, your needs are shifting and you'll get more of it doing this other thing. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I still don't like video games. It just means that I need a new pasture. I don't know why. I just thought of cows. So there we go.
Pastime, I think was the word you're looking for there.
Yeah. So, and I think, and it's hard because, I don't think there really is a good equivalent to it because I think being gay, there are so many other things that just don't come up. I really don't think it's as big of this, all encompassing, all taking over type thing.
Right.
But there's just nothing to compare to it. So yeah, I can think about this as a broken arm or whatever. And I don't know, it does kind of relate to that. When I had knee surgery, I was really into Taekwondo. It was my life, every day, all day. And then this thing happened where that was my all day, every day. Okay. What surgery? Why isn't this working? Whatever. I'm super focused on this. And then afterwards, because there was a fear of what could happen, it was like, okay, like I need to rediscover what I can do, what I want to do. Sports and Taekwondo right now are still a big part of who I am, what made me, but it's not here right now.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean it's gone. It doesn't mean I still don't love it. This doesn't mean I still don't appreciate it, but here are the things I can do now. Here's the things I want to do now. Like, as long as someone's not being a jerk to other people, I'm just like, you know what? There are so many things people can do for people. Even talking about people who don't even want to disclose to trans people that they're trans and still want to help trans people. Like, there are things other people you can still do in that situation. Like, help out with a clothing drive. You have a skill, like you know how to play guitar. You know how to teach someone to play guitar. There are trans people who need like affirming teachers in so many different things. And I think that's also hard for you. And when we think about trans activism and stuff, it's like, oh yeah, like public speaking and going to these groups and things like that. But there's also so much more. There are people who need help with resumes or how to prepare for a job or have a job.
Right.
And so like, you don't have to be trans or out or in any way like in transition, post-transition, whatever, to help with these certain skill sets. And like, as someone who needs to feel useful, like, like those things help. Like, oh yeah, like if push came to shove, like I could help with self-defense and I'd still feel like good about decisions or things like that. Like, I don't know, like there's so many ways to live life. And the point of transitioning, at least for me, was to do it, to live so that I wasn't miserable.
Right.
Or like consistently anxious. Well, what's the point of transitioning then if I'm just going to do something that's going to make me just as anxious as before?
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird. That is like almost every observation I make about my life ends with, man, life is weird. I've got a vagina now and I'm like going to the biggest Star Trek convention in the country next week. And man, life is weird. It's like I went on hormones and I have boobs now. Man, life is weird. Like
I have leg skin on my arm and arm skin and hip skin on my penis.
Right. Like,
and a little bit of leg skin there too. Like it's just like I'm just like, you think you're touching my arm, but you're really touching my leg. Like there's so much about all of this just really, you know, like sometimes I feel like it can't even be offended when someone's like, being trans is weird, because you know what?
Yep. 100%. Yep.
You know what? I can't fight you on that. Like,
yeah. So one of the first conversations I had when I came back to work after my surgery, somebody said something about like, yeah, things are just really weird. And I was like, friend, I just had my penis turned surgically inside out. You can't tell me about weird. And he was just like, you know what? You got me on that one. You're good.
Fair point.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. It's actually helped me figure out a lot, which like, I think those are the best episodes of the podcast where like, because I usually like, I have this conversation because I think this is a thing people should know about. It's like, I have a conversation that actually helps me figure out a few things about myself. So I appreciate that. Thanks for coming on, friend.
Yeah, it was fun. And I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, well, I mean, that's the point. I mean, that's like a podcast is literally like recorded, slightly planned out rambling. So you're good.
Okay, that's good.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto. If you think what we do here is important, please share this around to your friends. Search the Gaytheist Manifesto on Facebook and Twitter to find us there. I'm at GaytheistCali on Twitter. You can email us at podcast@thegaytheistmanifesto.com. We are a part of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We're a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. If that's not in the cards, you can give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and share us around to your friends. It all helps and it all makes a difference. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know that there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.